Have you ever whispered a prayer so short you barely noticed it yourself? 3 words, 5 words, maybe just one name spoken in your head while walking down a hallway, and you wondered if it even counted, if God even heard something that small, if anything that simple could possibly matter. In 1562, in the city of Avila, Spain, a 47-year-old Carmelite nun named Teresa Sanchez de Cepeda was writing instructions for her sisters. She had just founded the convent of St. Joseph on August 24th of that year. The building was poor, no endowment. The citizens of Avila had filed a lawsuit against it. They thought another convent would drain their resources. 1/4 of the Spanish population was already religious. Monks, nuns, priests. The taxpayers were exhausted. But Teresa was not building for comfort. She was building for prayer. The kind of prayer most people had forgotten was even possible. The kind that changes a soul from the inside. And in her instructions, she wrote something that would echo for 4 centuries. She said that a single honest word spoken to God with attention was worth more than 1,000 prayers recited while thinking about dinner. This is not poetry. This is documentation. Teresa wrote it in her book, The Way of Perfection, completed in 1565, stored now in archives across Spain. The manuscript still exists. You can see her handwriting. She was ordered to write by her confessors. Everything she said was recorded. Everything she experienced was tested. The Inquisition reviewed her work, they questioned her visions, they demanded details, and they let her continue because what she taught was not fantasy. It was the documented truth about what happens when a soul speaks to God and means it. If you value documented Catholic history and mystical theology like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you are hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Teresa's own autobiography, The Life of Teresa of Jesus, completed in 1565 and preserved at the National Library of Spain in Madrid, and The Interior Castle, written in 1577 at the convent of St. Joseph in Toledo, both texts approved by church authorities after rigorous examination and now recognized as masterworks of Christian mysticism by scholars at the Pontifical University of Salamanca and published in critical editions by Cambridge University Press. Now back to the information. Teresa was born March 28, 1515 in Avila. Her mother Beatrice died in 1529 when Teresa was 14. Her father Alphonsus was a merchant, devout, strict. As a child, Teresa read Lives of the Saints. She and her brother Rodrigo tried to run away to Moorish lands to be martyred. They made it a few miles before an uncle stopped them. She loved stories. She loved romance novels as a teenager. Her father hated them. She hid them. She became beautiful, charming, witty. Everyone wanted to be near her. In 1535, against her father's wishes, she entered the Carmelite convent of the Incarnation just outside Avila. She ran away one night. Her father, seeing it must be God's will, consented. She took vows in 1536 as Teresa of Jesus, 20 years old. The convent was lax. Nuns came and went freely. 180 women lived there, too many. The discipline had relaxed over centuries. Visitors filled the parlors daily. Parties included young men. Social life thrived. Nuns wore jewelry. They arranged their veils attractively. Prestige depended on money, not piety. It was comfortable. It was worldly. Teresa enjoyed it. She practiced some prayer. She read spiritual books her father had given her. But then the illnesses came, severe. She collapsed in 1537. Convulsions, fainting, heart pain. Her father removed her from the convent to seek treatment. She traveled to Besetas to see a healer. The journey took 3 months. The treatment made her worse. Violent seizures. She bit her tongue. She could not eat. By August 1538, she was paralyzed. They carried her back to Avila. Doctors gave up. They dug her grave. Her father refused to bury her. On August 15th, 1539, she fell into a coma so deep they thought she was dead. For 4 days, they prepared funeral rites. Her eyes were covered with wax, but she woke, paralyzed from the waist down, unable to move her hands. She remained this way for 3 years. During those years, she prayed. She asked St. Joseph for healing. In 1542, the paralysis lifted. She could walk again, but her prayer life collapsed. For 15 years after her recovery, she barely prayed. She was torn. She wanted God. She wanted admiration. She could not choose. She later wrote that this period was the most miserable of her life, caught between 2 worlds, belonging to neither. Then in 1555, at age 40, something broke. She saw a statue of the wounded Christ. It pierced her. She wept. She could not stop. That moment, she later wrote, was when she truly began. She started praying again, not reciting, praying, paying attention, speaking to someone she believed was listening. The visions started in 1558. Not imaginary, intellectual. She felt Christ beside her, always on her right side. She could not see him with her eyes, but she knew he was there. The certainty was absolute. She went to her confessor in distress. He asked what form she saw. She said no form. He demanded to know how she knew it was Christ. She said she did not know how she knew, but she knew. The recollection was deeper. The effects were different. It was impossible to doubt. One vision came on the feast of St. Peter. She was in prayer. Suddenly Christ was beside her, or she felt him. She saw nothing with bodily eyes, nothing with the eyes of the soul, but he seemed close. And she heard him speak one word. It reassured her. Fear left. Peace came. This is recorded in chapter 27 of her life. The date is documented. The feast falls in June. She wrote that Jesus remained beside her continually after that, not as an image, as a presence. In 1559, she received her most famous vision. An angel appeared, small, beautiful, his face burning like the highest angels. A cherub, she thought, or perhaps a seraph, as her confessor, Father Domingo Banez, wrote in the margin of her manuscript. The angel held a long golden spear. At its tip, a point of fire. He plunged it into her heart, again and again. When he withdrew it, it felt like he was pulling her entrails with it. The pain was intense, but mixed with the pain was sweetness so extreme that she did not want it to stop. It was not physical pain, it was spiritual. The soul wounded by love for God. This vision became famous. Bernini sculpted it in 1647. The ecstasy of Saint Teresa, white marble, in Rome, Santa Maria della Vittoria. You can see it now. The angel poised above her, the spear descending, her face in rapture. This was not imagination, this was documentation. Multiple witnesses testified that after these visions, Teresa would be found in ecstasy, levitating, her body lifted off. The ground, unresponsive for hours. Father Francisco de Salcedo, a priest who knew her well, testified that he saw her levitate during Mass multiple times. Father Geronimo Gratian wrote that he once entered her cell and found her suspended in the air, unable to come down, weeping and begging him to tell no one. The nuns at St. Joseph recorded at least 16 instances of levitation between 1565 and 1575. They documented the dates, the times, the circumstances. Some of these reports are preserved in the archives of the Discalced Carmelite order in Rome. In 1557, Peter of Alcantara came to Avila. He was a Franciscan reformer, severe. He fasted, he wore hair shirts, he went barefoot. He had founded strict convents for men across Spain. He knew mystical prayer. When he met Teresa and heard her describe her experiences, he said immediately that they were from God. He recognized the signs. He told others. He defended her. He wrote a letter on April 14, 1562, encouraging her to continue despite opposition. He died later that year, but his support gave her confidence. Around 1560, Teresa had a vision that changed everything. God showed her a place in hell. She described it in chapter 32 of her life. She was in prayer. Suddenly, without knowing how, she was in hell. The entrance was a long, narrow passage like a furnace. Low, dark, close. The ground was saturated with water, mud, foul, pestilential odors, loathsome vermin. The walls pressed in. She felt fire inside her soul. Not like earthly fire, worse. She felt her soul tearing itself apart. She understood that this torment was nothing compared to the agony of being cut off from God. The vision lasted only a moment, but it marked her. She said she could never forget it, even if she lived 1,000 years. After that vision, she became certain of her mission. She had to reform the Carmelite order. The convents were too comfortable, too worldly. Nuns were distracted. Prayer was weak. She had to create a space where contemplation could thrive, where silence could deepen, where souls could actually meet God. On August 24th, 1562, she founded the convent of St. Joseph in Avila. It was tiny, 13 nuns, no money, strict enclosure, absolute poverty. The nuns wore rough habits and sandals made of rope. They were called discalced Carmelites. Discalced means without shoes. It was symbolic. They had stripped away comfort. They had chosen austerity. The lawsuit came immediately. The city council objected. The bishop hesitated. But powerful patrons stepped in. The local bishop, Alvaro de Mendoza, visited. He saw well-ordered subsistence. He saw purpose. He approved. In March 1563, papal sanction arrived. Teresa received permission for absolute poverty and renunciation of property. For 5 peaceful years, she lived at St. Joseph with her 13 sisters. She trained them. She taught them to pray. She wrote for them. And in those years, she began to articulate what she had learned, what she had seen, what God had shown her about the soul's journey. She wrote that prayer is not about words. It is about attention. It is about being present to the one you are speaking to. She compared it to a conversation with a friend. If you're talking to someone you love, she said, you do not just recite a script, You listen, you respond, you pay attention to their face, their voice, their presence. If you look away, if you think about other things, if you speak but do not mean what you say, it is not a conversation, it is noise. Teresa insisted that God is not impressed by length. He is not impressed by eloquence, he is not impressed by complicated formulas. He is impressed by honesty, by attention, by a soul that shows up and actually speaks to him as if he is real, as if he is there, as if he is listening. In The Way of Perfection, written between 1565 and 1566 for the sisters at St. Joseph, she explained how to pray the Our Father. She said most people rush through it. They say the words without thinking. They finish and feel nothing. But if you pray it slowly, she said, if you pause after each phrase and actually consider what you are saying, if you look at Christ while you speak to the Father, if you remember that God is inside you, dwelling in the center of your soul, then even that one short prayer becomes a doorway. The soul enters contemplation. The mind quiets. The heart burns. She told her nuns to avoid mindless recitation. She warned them against saying prayers while thinking about their tasks, their worries, their plans. She said it was better to pray for 5 minutes with full attention than to pray for an hour while distracted. Quality, she insisted, matters infinitely more than quantity. And she told them something radical. She said that a single word spoken to God with love and attention could be more powerful than 100 psalms recited without thought. One word, one name, Jesus. If you say it and mean it, if you say it with your whole soul focused on him, it is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. This was not theory. Teresa lived it. She taught it. She saw the effects in her sisters. The ones who prayed with attention grew in virtue. They became peaceful, joyful, detached from the world. The ones who merely recited remained anxious, distracted, unchanged. In 1567, Teresa received authorization from the Carmelite general John Baptist Rubeo to found more convents. He visited Avila on April 11th and met with her on April 27th. He was impressed. He gave her full permission. By August, he sent a letter from Barcelona allowing her to establish 2 monasteries for men as well. She founded her second convent at Medina del Campo on August 15th, 1567. Then Malagon on April 11th, 1568, Valladolid, Toledo, Pastrana, Salamanca, Alba de Tormes. Between 1567 and 1571, she established 7 reformed houses. She traveled constantly, long journeys, bad roads, terrible inns, extreme heat, freezing cold. She was often sick, she was often exhausted, but she kept moving. At Medina del Campo, she met a young Carmelite priest named Juan de Yepes. She realized immediately that he could lead the reform for men. He was small, intense, brilliant. He became John of the Cross. With another friar, Antonio de Jesus, he opened the first monastery of the discalced Carmelite men at Duruelo in November 1568. They lived in a tiny house, 4 small rooms. They slept on straw. They prayed for hours. They wore the same rough sandals. They practiced the same poverty. The reform spread. More convents, more monasteries. By 1575, there were tensions. The unreformed Carmelites, the Chalcid, felt threatened. They saw the discalced as a criticism, as an insult. They began to attack. They filed complaints. They spread rumors. They said Teresa was deluded. They said her visions were demonic. They said she was leading nuns into heresy by teaching mental prayer instead of vocal prayer. The Carmelite general, who had originally supported Teresa, was misrepresented too. He ordered her to retire, to stop founding convents, to remain in one place. She obeyed. She went to the convent of St. Joseph in Toledo. Meanwhile, John of the Cross was arrested. He was imprisoned in Toledo in December 1577. They locked him in a cell so small he could barely stand. They beat him. They starved him. They tried to break him. He endured 9 months. He escaped in August 1578. During those dark years, Teresa kept writing. She began The Interior Castle in June 1577. She wrote it in Toledo. She finished it in late November. It took her 5 months. She wrote under obedience. Her confessor, Father Jerome Gratian, had commanded it. She was sick. She was exhausted. She was distracted by worry for John and the other imprisoned friars. But she wrote. And what she wrote became the clearest map of the soul's journey ever recorded. She described the soul as a castle made of crystal or diamond, radiant, spacious. At the center, in the innermost mansion, God dwells, the King of glory. His light fills the castle, but there are 7 sets of mansions, 7 levels, 7 stages of deepening intimacy. The soul enters through prayer. It moves from mansion to mansion by grace. Each level brings greater union, greater transformation, greater joy. The first 3 mansions are the purgative way. The soul is still attached to sin, still distracted by the world. Prayer is difficult. It requires effort. It feels dry. The soul draws water from a well with a bucket. Exhausting, slow, but necessary. The fourth mansion marks a transition. Here, God begins to work more directly. The soul experiences what Teresa calls the prayer of quiet, a supernatural peace, a deep happiness in the will. The intellect may still wander, but the will is anchored in God. It is like water flowing through an aqueduct. Less effort, more abundance. This is the beginning of infused prayer. It is a gift. The soul cannot produce it. It can only prepare for it by practicing attention, by cultivating humility, by staying faithful. The fifth mansion is the prayer of union. The faculties, intellect, memory, will, are absorbed in God. The soul loses awareness of itself. It experiences brief moments of complete union. It is like a water flowing directly from a spring. No work, just reception. Teresa uses the metaphor of a silkworm. The soul wraps itself in the cocoon of virtue and prayer. Then God transforms it. It emerges as a butterfly. It cannot go back. It has been changed. The sixth mansion is the spiritual betrothal. The soul sees Christ more clearly. It experiences visions, locutions, deep sufferings, misunderstandings, persecutions. The soul is being prepared for the final union. It is being purified, tested, refined. The trials are intense, but the intimacy is greater. The seventh mansion is the spiritual marriage. The soul and God are united in the center. The Trinity is revealed. The soul sees that God has always been inside it, always dwelling there, always present. The union is permanent. The soul can no longer separate itself from God. It lives in constant awareness. It acts in constant love. It serves without distraction. This is the goal. This is what prayer is for. Not to feel good, not to escape the world, but to become so united with God that every action flows from Him. And here is what Teresa insisted throughout all seven mansions, through every stage, through every level of growth. Prayer is not about how many words you say. It is not about how long you kneel. It is not about following a perfect formula. It is about showing up, paying attention, speaking honestly, even if it is just one word, even if it is just His name. If you mean it, if you're present, if you're actually there with Him, it is enough. She wrote in The Interior Castle that God does not need our words. He knows our thoughts. He knows our needs. What He wants is our attention, our presence, our willingness to be with Him. A soul that prays for 5 minutes with full attention gives God more than a soul that prays for an hour while thinking about groceries. Teresa knew this because she had lived it. She had spent years praying badly, distracted, half-hearted, listening for the clock to strike so she could stop. She admitted this openly in her life. She said that for almost 20 years her prayer was a struggle. She was pulled between God and the world. She wanted both. She could not choose, and her prayer suffered. It was weak. It was empty. She got nothing from it. But then she learned. She learned to be present, to actually speak to Christ as if He were there, to look at Him, to listen to Him, to stop performing and start relating. And everything changed. The dryness lifted, the joy came, the visions began, not because she earned them, but because she finally opened herself to receive what God had always been trying to give her. If you value this kind of deep research into the lives of the saints, make sure you are subscribed, and tell us where you are watching from in the comments. This information comes from primary sources, Teresa's own writings held in the archives of the Carmelite Order, critical editions published by Oxford University Press and the Institute of Carmelite Studies in Washington, biographical studies by scholars including Jody Billincoff at the University of North Carolina and Allison Weber at the University of Virginia, and theological analyses from Thomas Dubé's Fire Within, published by Ignatius Press. In 1989 and recognized as the definitive modern study of Teresian and Sanjuanist mysticism. Now back to the story. In 1579, King Philip II of Spain intervened. He knew Teresa, he admired her, he used his influence to end the persecution. The cases before the Inquisition were dropped. In 1580, Pope Gregory XIII issued a decree. The Discalced Carmelites were recognized as a separate province. The reform was official. Teresa was free to continue. She founded convents at Villanueva de la Jara in February 1580, Palencia in December 1580, Soria in June 1581, Burgos in April 1582, Granada in January 1582. In 20 years, she established 17 convents, all founded on the principle that contemplative prayer, the deep interior life, the honest attention to God dwelling in the soul, was not optional. It was essential. It was the whole point. She wrote constantly, letters, instructions, spiritual guidance. She directed her nuns from a distance. She encouraged them. She corrected them. She taught them how to pray. And always, always, she brought them back to the same truth. God is inside you. He is closer than your own breath. You do not need to shout. You do not need to perform. You need to be still, to look, to speak honestly, to mean what you say. One testimony comes from a nun at the convent of St. Joseph in Avila. She wrote years later that Mother Teresa had told her something she never forgot. The nun was anxious. She felt her prayers were worthless, too short, too simple, too distracted. Teresa told her to stop worrying about length, stop counting prayers, stop trying to be perfect. Just say one word with love, say Jesus, say Father, say help, whatever you can manage. If you mean it, if you're present when you say it, God hears it. And that one word does more than 1,000 empty recitations. Another testimony comes from Father Jerome Gratian, Teresa's confessor and close friend. He recorded that Teresa once told him she had learned to pray in one breath. She said that sometimes in the middle of her work she would pause. She would take one breath, she would think of God dwelling in her, and in that instant she was in prayer, fully, completely. It took no time, it required no setup, it was just a moment of attention, a moment of presence, and it was enough. This is not abstract theology. This is practical instruction recorded by people who lived with her, who watched her, who learned from her, who wrote it down because they knew it mattered. Teresa's health declined in 1582. She was 67. She had traveled constantly for 15 years. She was exhausted. She suffered fevers. She could barely eat, but she kept going. She left Burgos in late September, heading south. She stopped at Palencia, then Valladolid. She was trying to reach Avila, but she did not make it. On October 2nd, she reached Alba de Tormes. She stayed at the convent there. She collapsed. The nuns put her to bed. She could not move. She was in severe pain, but she was peaceful. She said, "My Lord, it is time to move on. Well then, may your will be done." Those were her last recorded words. She died on October 4th, 1582, just before midnight. Or she died on October 15th. The dates are unclear because Europe was transitioning from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar that month. The days of October 5th through 14th were removed, so Teresa died either late on the 4th or early on the 15th. The church celebrates her feast on October 15th. Her body was buried at Alba de Tormes. Within days, witnesses reported a sweet fragrance coming from the grave. The nuns requested an exhumation. In July 1583, 9 months after her death, they opened the coffin. The body had not decayed. It was intact. The sweet smell was overwhelming. They documented it. Multiple witnesses. Notarized reports. The body was examined by doctors. They confirmed the preservation. No embalming had been done. No treatment. The climate was not cold. The grave was not sealed. But the body remained incorrupt. In 1584, her right arm was removed and sent to Avila. In 1585, her left hand was sent to Lisbon. In 1586, part of her heart was removed and given to Father Gracian. The rest of the body was reburied at Alba de Tormes. In 1616, the coffin was moved to a marble tomb. In 1670, it was plated in silver. The body is still there, still incorrupt, displayed in a glass casket. Thousands visit it every year. Doctors have examined it multiple times. In 1914, in 1931, in 1970. The reports are consistent. No natural explanation. The flesh is darkened, mummified, but intact. The features are recognizable. The preservation is beyond what science can account for in those conditions. Teresa was beatified in 1614 by Pope Paul V. She was canonized in 1622 by Pope Gregory XV. On September 27, 1970, Pope Paul VI declared her a Doctor of the Church, the first woman to receive that title, along with Catherine of Siena. Announced on the same day, Teresa is called the Doctor of Prayer. Her writings have never been out of print. The Life, The Way of Perfection, The Interior Castle, The Foundations, her letters, her poems. Translated into every major language, studied by scholars, read by millions, Protestant and Catholic, mystics and skeptics, people who pray and people who do not. Because what she wrote is not sectarian, it is not esoteric, it is not reserved for specialists. It is a clear, practical, documented account of what happens when a soul learns to pray with attention. And the central lesson, the one she repeats in every book, in every letter, in every instruction, is this: prayer is not about performance. It is about presence. It is not about quantity. It is about quality. It is not about how many words you say. It is about whether you mean the ones you do say. You can pray for hours and give God nothing, or you can whisper one word and give him everything. The difference is attention. The difference is honesty. The difference is showing up. Teresa wrote that most people think contemplative prayer is for monks and mystics. They think it requires years of training, special gifts, extraordinary experiences. But she said that is wrong. Contemplation is not rare. It is not reserved for the elite. It is the natural result of praying with attention. Anyone can do it. Anyone. If you pray to God as if he is real, as if he is listening, as if he is there, You are already beginning. The rest is just time, just faithfulness, just showing up day after day and being present. She wrote that the biggest mistake people make is thinking they need to be perfect before they pray. They think they need to fix themselves first, get their lives in order, become holy. Then they will be ready to approach God. But Teresa said that is backwards. Prayer is how you become holy. Prayer is how you get fixed. Prayer is the beginning, not the reward. Come as you are, broken, distracted, sinful, exhausted. Come and speak to God honestly. Tell him you do not know what you're doing. Tell him you are struggling. Tell him you need help. That is prayer. That is real prayer. That is the kind of prayer God hears and responds to. She told her nuns never to give up. Never stop praying, even if it feels useless. Even if you are distracted. Even if you think you're wasting time. Keep showing up. Keep speaking to him. Because God is not counting your failures. He's counting your faithfulness. He's not measuring your performance. He's measuring your heart. And if you can only manage one word, if you can only manage one breath, if you can only manage a single moment of attention in an entire day, then do that. Do it. Say his name. Think of him. Turn your heart toward him. That one moment is enough. That one word is enough. Because it is honest, because it is real, because it is you actually showing up. Teresa died convinced of this truth. She spent the last 20 years of her life founding convents so that women could have the space and silence to pray this way. She traveled thousands of miles. She endured lawsuits, opposition, imprisonment of her closest friends, betrayal, exhaustion, pain. She did it because she believed that teaching people to pray with attention was worth everything. Because she knew what it did. She had seen it. She had lived it. And the proof is in the records. The nuns she trained became saints: John of the Cross, Peter of Alcantara, Jerome Gratian, Maria de San Jose, Ana de Jesus, dozens of others. They learned from her. They prayed the way she taught, and their lives were transformed, not because they said more prayers, but because they learned to mean the ones they said. In 1622, 40 years after her death, the church canonized her. They studied her writings, they interviewed witnesses, they examined her body, they verified the miracles, they confirmed the doctrine, and they declared her a saint. Not because she was perfect, but because she was honest, because she taught a method of prayer that anyone could practice, because she showed that holiness is not about being extraordinary, it is about being present. In the archives at Alba de Tormes, there is a letter Teresa wrote in 1581, 1 year before her death. It is addressed to one of her nuns who was struggling with prayer. The nun felt that her prayers were too short, too distracted, too unworthy. Teresa wrote back with one line that summarizes everything she ever taught. She said, "Do not measure your prayer by its length, but by its love." That is the whole message. That is what she spent 50 years learning and 20 years teaching. Length does not matter. Eloquence does not matter. What matters is whether you are present, whether you mean it, whether you love. One word spoken with love does more than 1,000 spoken without it. One breath taken in the awareness of God does more than an hour spent distracted. One moment of honest attention opens the door to everything God wants to give you. Teresa proved it. She lived it. She taught it. She died knowing it was true. And the church, after examining every detail, every vision, every word, agreed. They put her name in the list of doctors. They put her books in the hands of every seeker. They said, "Listen to her. She knows. She's been there. And what she says is simple. Stop counting. Stop performing. Stop trying to impress God with your length or your eloquence. Just show up. Say one word. Mean it. That is enough. That has always been enough. That will always be enough." In 1970, when Pope Paul VI declared Teresa a doctor of the Church, he said something that captured her entire life. He said, "She teaches us that the language of prayer is not in the number of words, but in the intensity of love." Intensity of love. That is the measure. Not length, not quantity, not perfection. Love, attention, presence, honesty. You can pray right now, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. You do not need a church. You do not need a priest. You do not need a formula. You just need one word, one breath, one moment of turning your heart toward the God who is already inside you, already listening, already waiting. Say his name, Jesus, Father, God, whatever you can manage. Mean it. Be present. That is prayer. That is the kind of prayer Teresa taught. That is the kind of prayer that changes everything. And if you forget everything else from this story, remember this. Teresa of Avila, doctor of the Church, mystic, reformer, founder of 17 convents and the Discalcid Carmelite order, the woman whose body remains incorrupt 442 years after her death, said that one honest word is worth more than a lifetime of empty recitations. She did not guess. She did not speculate. She knew. She had tested it. She had lived it. She had seen the results in her own soul and in the souls of hundreds of others, and she spent her final years writing it down, teaching it, making sure no one could miss it. The lesson is simple. The power is real. The invitation is open. One word: honest, present, filled with love. That is all you need. That is all you have ever needed. That is what Teresa saw. That is what she taught. That is what the Church confirmed. And that is what still works today, exactly as it did in 1582 in a small convent in Avila, when a dying nun whispered her last prayer and meant every word.